Hi everyone. Today, welcome to another online session. I am with my students of architecture. So they have been given a couple of assignments on the vernacular architecture of India, various parts of India, and they have done some work on it. So let's hear them out, what they have to say on it. Yeah. Let's start.
Okay. A very good afternoon, sir, and to my fellow teammates. I am Shomavo Baroi from the group consisting of Shodrupa Bordhon, Prashita Kundu, and Shomdev Dotto. Here we are presenting on our subject in architectural final year. The subject is vernacular architecture, and we are presenting on the vernacular architecture of South India. Now, as to go through the contents of the presentation, there is a brief introduction of vernacular architecture of South India, and it is followed by the list of South Indian states where this type of architecture is found, namely Kerala, Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, and Tamil Nadu. Now, coming on to the brief introduction about what is vernacular architecture. Indian vernacular architecture has evolved originally from the skills of the craftsmen and the austere characters of the surrounding fabric. The vast spectrum of vernacular architecture in South India is not only highlighting the architectural part, but also is dealing with the cultural, social, and occupational aspects. Cumulatively, it embodies the earthy, rustic, and harmonious fabric influenced by the human behavior of that specific region. Despite the diversity of its types, it can be broadly classified into two types, that is, Kacha and Pakka buildings. Now, Kacha ones are usually built from natural materials like bamboo, thatch, mud, grass, sticks. Due to the vulnerability of the materials to the weather changes, these structures are short-lived and demand regular maintenance. On the contrary, the Kacha buildings can be constructed quickly with minimal costs and require less labor, and the materials are locally available. Now, on the other hand, we see the Pakka buildings, and they are constructed from the materials which are resistant to wear, such as forms of stones or brick, clay tiles, metal or other durable materials, and are sometimes used mortar to bind. That does not need to be constantly maintained or replaced. However, such structures are expensive to construct as the materials are costly and more labor is required. Now, despite of the various types, most of the buildings are influenced on the basis of the size of the family, how food is prepared, and interactions in the terms of usage and sharing of spaces, and most importantly, on the climate. Most of the dwellings have a central courtyard which is functional in terms of the usage and contributes to the climate responsive structures. The semi-open central courtyard aids in the collection of rainwater, light, and ventilation. Now, most of the celebration takes place in the heart of the domestic space. Few other common elements in the South Indian dwellings are the thinnai, which is a raised platform, the internal columned areas, the DT area, and the rear portion consisting of the kitchen and a secondary courtyard. The thinnai, or the external platform, is designed to offer a social space for the occupants. Previously, privacy was not a major concern like it is now. Coming to the temple architecture of South India, we see that it reflects the style of Dravidian architecture and dates back to the 17th century AD. Here, the towers are in the shape of a pyramid called the Vinamam are present. It can be observed that the pillars are quite prominent feature of design and study in the temple complexes.
Vimana, not Vinama.
Yes, sir, Vinamam.
No, Vimana. Vimana, that is, Vimana is a flying vehicle or a spaceship or something. No, from
Vimanam.
Vimanam.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
This particular presentation, we are presenting on the architectural types and techniques that are actually prevalent in the state Kerala. So, as Shomavo mentioned that about the other states, so we'll be primarily talking about the state of Kerala. So before we delve into the details of the architectural practices and the techniques that are actually conducted in the architectural sector of this state, we need to know and get acquainted with the climatic pattern that this region actually experiences. Because as we know that there's a close interrelationship that works between the climatic conditions of an area with the vernacular architecture that is actually practiced in that very particular region. So if we kind of try to recollect the geographical map of India, we'll find that the Kerala is a state of India in the southernmost tip of the subcontinent, which shares environmental characteristics with the Malaya and the Pacific archipelago. And therefore, we can deduce that it has a wet tropical climate that the other two archipelago does. Now, coming into the etymology or the nomenclature of Kerala in another term, so we actually deem Kerala to be the Malabar region owing to the geographical location of it. So if we break the word Malabar into various parts and syllables, so we'll find that the first part or the first syllable, that is Ma, it's a word which is of a Sanskrit origin, and it refers to the mountains that is present in the vicinity. And the last part, that is the last syllable Bar, it is a word with an Arabic origin that refers to the sea that Kerala is surrounded by on its western and southern part. So the mountain ranges that are actually present in South India blocks the wind that flows from the Arabian Sea towards the mainland India. But as Kerala falls in the windward side of these winds that are actually born out of the Arabian Sea, so this region kind of experiences a frequent rainfall throughout the year, which is in much kind of contrast to the adjoining state of Tamil Nadu, which is a dry, shadowed, rainless plain. And this again kind of serves as an good evidence, like why we said that climate always has a good and a strong interrelationship with the vernacular architecture that is practiced in a particular region. So now moving on to the further details of the Keralan architecture, now that we are done with the climate part. So Kerala architecture stands out to be the ultimate testimonials to the Vishwakarma Sthapatis of Kerala. The unique style of architecture prevalent here has a striking contrast to the Dravidian architecture. Now, what is Dravidian architecture? Dravidian architecture is basically this nomenclature that is given to the type of architecture that is prevalent in the southern part of India. But then Kerala, though being a southern state itself, has a striking contrast to the Dravidian architecture because there's a reason behind it. Because out here in this region, in the past, for over 2 millenniums, both Dravidian architecture and Indian Vedic architectural science, that is Vastu Shastra, were practiced hand in hand. Now that brings us to Vastu Vidya, or the traditional architecture. So the traditional Keralan architecture is the Vastu Vidya, which is derived from the Sthapatya Veda or Atharva Veda, and it deals with two types of architecture. So here we can see that how the architectural forms also have a linkage to the historical texts of the cult. Now talking about the two types of architecture that basically the vernacular architecture of Kerala encompasses. Firstly is the residential architecture, which is also known as Manusyalaya, and the second being the temple architecture. So this residential architecture is more of a functional architecture, while temple architecture is more of a conceptual one. So further in the slides, we'll be talking about the residential architecture, which will be taken over by my teammate Prashita.
All right. So, yeah, Prashita we need to unmute Prashita. Yeah. All right, Prashita.
Yeah, good evening, sir, and good evening, my fellow teammates. I am Prashita Kundu, architecture student from Techno India University. And right now we are explaining about the assignment that our professor Saptarshi Shankar Chakraborty has assigned us. And we are explaining on the vernacular architecture of South India. So as Shotrupa has mentioned about the types of architecture, residential and temple, I will be coming to the residential architecture of South India, Kerala. House in Kerala is generally called Viru. Now, Viru gives shelter to joint family or thrower, and the joint family system consequently promotes the tradition of living in a huge shelter or mansion. Now, the term is Dravidian and is used in some parts of Tamil Nadu and North Sri Lanka. Now, all types of residential architecture, but generally the people of Kerala use the term Viru as Thravar. Now, the type of houses that we see in Kerala, they are very much diverse, and particularly the tribal people, they refer to their houses or huts according to various differences depending upon its locality, social status, and structural types. Now, certain examples that we can cite about the residential architecture in Kerala are those of the house of Paria, is called Sherry. The agrestic slave Sherman lives in a shala, and the blacksmith, goldsmith, weaver, they live in a house called the Kuri, and Raja lives in Kovilakam or Kottaram. So basically, according to your strata of society that you belong to or the work you do, according to that, the house you live, they are named various depending on it. So the next will be taken over by Shatarupa.
So, as my former teammate Prashita mentioned at the very first, that a house in Kerala is actually referred to as a Viru. So, now we'll be specifically focusing on the Viru and the types of it. So, firstly, we have the Variyam or the Pisharam, which is the wretched, humble house of the ordinary folks, the tribals, or the one that we call Adivasis. So, this is the first type. Moving on to the second type, we have Ekasala, which is an eye-shaped single rectangular house. It belongs to the farmers or the middle class non-farmers. The third being Nalukettu, which is a courtyard house, and it generally belongs to the landlords. Fourthly, we move on to the great mansion of Ettukettu and Patinjarukettu, which are much bigger structures and are actually inhabited by richer landlords. And fifth being the most common household that we observe in both the urban and the rural sector of the state itself. Like, these are inhabited by the ordinary people, ordinary citizens of Kerala. So now these were like kind of an overview that we provided for the various types and categories of the Keralan houses. Now we'll be moving on to the further details of these residential architecture. So firstly, we'll be talking about the roofing system. So out here in the state of Kerala, we'll see an extensive usage of sloped roofs. And these rigid roofs are pitched at an angles between 30 degree to 40 degree. These roofs are basically intricately carved cables protruding from the roof with overhangs supported by the wooden brackets. And all these roofing systems are basically prefabricated structures. So they are kind of fixed in the ground and then assembled at the top. And during the assembling or the fixing mechanism, no nails are used. Basically, all these roofing members are interlocked with the holes that are present in the gables. And then we move on to the next point, where we discuss about the materials with which the walls and the roofs are constructed. The walls are basically timber on earth, and the roofs are basically the coconut leaves or the Mangalore country tiles that are prevalent or like kind of locally available out there in the city, out there in the state of Kerala. And now structurally, if we come into the structural form, we'll see that the roof frame was supported on the pillars on walls, erected on a plinth raised from the ground for protection against dampness and insects in the tropical ground level and the plinth level that we actually study in our academic years of architecture. So this was with the roofing system. Next, we move on to the flooring system. So the most common type of flooring that we observe in these residential architecture is that of the beaten earth that is polished with cow dung at regular intervals. In more expensive buildings, we find the presence of a typical black color traditional flooring, which was done with a mixture of lime, sand, coconut shell, white of egg, jiggery, coconut water, and other vegetable extracts. So there's a lot of organic stuff that goes into that entire admixture. And again, the smoothness of that flooring was achieved by polishing the floor with a particular variety of banana. So these are kind of two very prevalent type of flooring that we can see in the residential houses of Kerala. But besides these two, we also find stone flooring, wooden flooring, burnt clay brick flooring. like all over the state of Kerala, like in the residential housing sectors. Now we'll be talking about the building materials, which will be taken over by my teammate Prashita.
So now coming to the building materials that are being used in vernacular architecture in South India. It's
Regarding
basically-
before Prashita,
Yes, sir.
regarding the building materials, you need to encompass
Yes, sir.
like what are the predominant building materials that are there, like the building
Yes,
materials, the common building materials used for vernacular construction in Kerala.
Yes.
Basically the mud, laterite, granite, stone blocks, lime
Yeah.
blocks, wood, bamboo, clay, roofing tiles.
It's the names.
Laterite is a predominant one, so you should cover laterite,
Yeah.
right? So just get into that then.
So shall I like explain the materials, or
Yes.
shall I just name them?
No, it's not about naming exactly. You can name and then tell about where exactly it is used. A couple of examples, maybe the way that you had done it.
Okay.
So go ahead.
So coming to the building materials that are being used in vernacular architecture in Kerala, we can namely see specifically the availability of granite, which is a very strong and durable building stone, which is restricted mainly to the highlands and marginally to some hilly zones. And the second one is laterite stone, which is found in abundance in Kerala, and it is a local stone, so it is very easily available for building the houses. So blocks of this stone may be bonded in by the use of mortars or shell line. Now coming to timber, which is a prime structural material, which is also abundantly found in Kerala, and it has many varieties from bamboo to teak to rosewood, like different qualities of timber, which adds to the quality of the house that are being constructed. And timber is being used for mainly for woodwork of columns, walls and roof frames in Kerala architecture. And the clays that are being used, they are used in many forms for veiling, infilling the timber floors and making bricks and tiles after firing in kilns tempered with admixture. So basically we can see that it is being used as a mortar or a lime. It's a very locally available, so it's very cheap also. And also coming to the last but not the least, the palm leaves, which are still effectively used for thatching the roofs, for making partition walls along with the mud. So along with mud, they also use palm leaves, which are easily available. And certain examples which
they use
yes,
palm leaves to reinforce the mud walls. So it is kind of a interwoven palm leaf structure which is there inside the mud wall. It becomes a reinforced mud wall. So and it's a very nice earthquake resistant structure and disaster proof structure.
Yeah, and it is abundantly available at that site, so it
Yes,
is easily
abundant,
usable. Yes.
Right.
And certain examples where we can see this, like we have talked about the different materials, flooring system and everything about Kerala. So certain examples of houses that we can cite or we can say is mainly the Hindu house at Mankavu, Calicut, Kerala, and Hindu house at Trivandrum, Kerala. Like these are the most examples where we can see the type of materials, the roofing system, the flooring system that we have been talked about. So by this we conclude about vernacular architecture in Kerala of the residential part. Now coming to the temple architecture of the Kerala, which is, as Shatrupa mentioned, is a conceptual architecture. It falls under the category of. So temples in Kerala were previously known as Mukkalvattam, and later it came to be known as Ambalam or Shetram or sometimes even Tali. So temple architecture in Kerala is very distinctive and it's very different from other parts of the region of India, and it is mainly predominantly because of the geographical location of Kerala that we can see, which is surrounded by forests, and also it is blessed with the bounties of monsoons. Like it has, as Shatrupa mentioned, like the northeasterly winds which brings rainfall to this site. So we can see, so therefore the temples of Kerala, the plan that we can see certain examples, they are mainly square or rectangular or circular in shape, and there is a main core in this temple architecture of Kerala which is known as Srikovil, and it stands along the east-west axis. And these temples in Kerala are not only used for religious centers or worship, but also as centers for learning, dance, performances, festivals, dramas, but all the religious theme it is based upon are performed there. And now coming to the exterior facade of the temple architecture of Kerala, we can see that they are very beautifully and elegantly ornamented, and we can see fine arts which covers every part of the temple, like beautifully decorated. And it is possible because of the fine craftsmanship of the Dravidians during that era, during that time. So we can see how beautifully ornamented they are. So by this, we will now move forward to vernacular architecture, Andhra Pradesh.
Right.
Good evening, sir, and my fellow batchmates. I'm Somdev Datta. I'm a fifth-year architecture student of Techno.
Yeah, you get highlighted. Okay. Yeah.
So I'm a fifth-year architecture student of Techno India University, Kolkata, and I will be sharing a part of our assignment, Vernacular Architecture of South, given to us by our professor Saptoshi Shankar Chakravarti. Now, moving on to the next topic, which is vernacular architecture of Andhra Pradesh. As we all know that Andhra Pradesh is located in South India and is surrounded by Tamil Nadu in the south, Maharashtra in the north and northwest, Madhya Pradesh in the northeast, Karnataka in the west, and by the Bay of Bengal in the east. It is situated on the Deccan Plateau and is one of the oldest geographical formation of the country. Now, the Kacha buildings of Andhra Pradesh are of two types. The first type is circular in plan with high thatched conical roofs, and second rectangular with 2 or 4 pitch roofs. These are basically built of mud and wattle. The house is raised on a plinth decorated with finger marks in white rice paste or vertical stripes of white and red ochre. Now, coming to Chutilu, so it is from coastal Andhra Pradesh. This house cluster is found in Visakhapatnam. In Andhra, it is locally referred to as Chutilu, which means a round house. Here, the word Illu stands for house. In cyclone-prone areas, fishermen and agricultural farmers build circular houses which nestle closely to form clusters. The shape and the positioning help the house battle against the raging wind. The house consists of an inner circular room which is enveloped by another circular space that serves as the kitchen on one side and a store or sitting or sleeping area at the other end. There is also a cooking area or vantasala just outside the house. The circular house was based on the concept of a veranda and again a veranda. Sometimes there is a shelter for the bullock carts. The inner room received light from light through the doors to the room only. The walls of the house are built by the cop wall technique that places balls of mud to make an 18-inch thick wall. Palmyra timber is used for rafter, Palmyra thatch for the roof, and lime wash for the wall finish. There is a flat mud roof and timber roof under the sloping thatched roof that protects the belongings in case of a fire. Somavo, you can continue with the next topic.
Before you move on from Andhra Pradesh, just
Yes, sir.
in Andhra, sometime in the year 2017, I guess, I went to a place called Lipakshi. It is just in the Anantapura district of Andhra, the border of Andhra Pradesh and Karnataka. So there are very interesting temple is there. It's so ancient. Nobody knows when exactly it was built. People say it is 16th century, but it's probably older. Maybe there are some ruins where they are present like since ancient times. Around 70-80 pillars are there in that temple, right? So one of the pillars, it actually doesn't touch the ground. It basically floats.
So from the ceiling.
There's
I
a
have
couple of,
seen that.
couple of millimeter gap in between the plinth of the temple and the pillar. So the pillar is basically on the air. Nobody knows how this happens. So it's a huge stone pillar, a couple of tons weight. It's not even possible that it is hung from the top somehow. How can it hang from the top? It is still floating. So it's pretty interesting. I mean, whether there is any magnetic base there on which it floats, nobody knows. So I just recalled from your Andhra discussion. Anyway, I will continue.
Well, thank you, sir, for that recall. So thank you for letting us know. We would get to look on it.
Vipakshi is a very interesting place to visit there. But it's close to Bangalore. I drove from Bangalore out to there. It was like around 2.5 hour journey, I guess, from Bangalore on by road. And but there's the problem is that you can't, there is no place to stay. Actually, there's a government guest house which also has limited seats. Either you visit and come back the same day, or you stay somewhere far away from that place. So that's an issue. Anyway, you continue with your discussion.
Sure, sir. So, as Bhavanti, the preferred plan is the Chitrasala plan, with 3 bays and a small courtyard in the middle. The rooms are located at the back. The building materials are as follows. The reapers are bamboos, the beams are palmyra, and the roof tiles are semicircular in shape. If the owner can afford, the house will have an outside garden, bathroom and utility area enclosed by walls and a separate entrance. The plinth is made up of stone walls or mud mortars, and the walls are either of mud or sun-dried bricks. The weaver's house is an adaptation of an architectural house. The house was constructed by the local masons and carpenters after the same plan of the family house where Mr. Janardhan grew up. Ikkat is known as the technique of dyeing the yarn to form designs before putting the yarn on the looms, and it is majorly famous in Nalgonda district. Moving on to vernacular architecture of Karnataka.
Okay, so vernacular architecture of Karnataka. As we know that Karnataka is a state in the southwestern region of India, which was formed on 1st November 1956 with the passage of the States Reorganization Act. It was originally known as the state of Mysore. The antiquity of architecture of Karnataka can be traced to its southern Neolithic and early Iron Age, having witnessed the architectural, ideological and utilitarian transformation from shelter to ritual to religion. Now coming to Guttu houses. So the Guttu houses of the land owning community of South Karnataka are large inward looking Hindu mansions. The typical Guttu house has a steeply pitched roof combining single and double storied blocks around a courtyard. It is the isolated home of a well-to-do family designed to deter attacks. The facade is usually symmetrical around a central projection, which is the tallest and most impressive feature of the house. And the principal building material is wood. Now, Guttu Mane, which are the traditional homes of burnt community of coastal Karnataka, can still be seen across the Tamil Nadu region. It is generally a square complex with ample space for storage all around. The pillars are made of wood. There are usually 4 doors, one on each side of the square complex. The roof is of Mangalore tiles. The inner square is an open area, a place often utilized to dry stuff the natural way with sunlight. One of the well-preserved houses, Kodiyal Guttu, stands at the center of Mangalore city. Also, the royal houses of the Bunds are called the Armane, which means the palace.
And Guttu, what is Guttu? What?
Yes, sir.
What is Guttu?
Sir, can you repeat?
Guttu house. What is Guttu house? Guttu house is a house of prestige, a royal house, you can say.
Yeah, as I have told that it is a house for a well-to-do family.
Yes, it's a house of it's a prestigious house.
Yes,
not
sir.
a house of a common person. That is what it means in Kannada. All right, continue.
Okay.
Continuing the presentation, we will talk about Kodava houses, or known as
And in
Alimani.
just before you go there, in Karnataka, or for that matter, the most of the Dravidian houses that you say, every house is so very Vastu compliant that even today, I mean, they follow the same principles even when they construct their houses today. I mean, even their housing complexes, their bungalows and everything, they are so very Vastu compliant. And today we have diluted the Vastus and everything in our part of the country. You know, challenging a lot of stuff, of course, to make it relevant for the needs of the day. But again, they follow Vastu to the extent of what had been followed like centuries back. So that's a very unique thing. I mean, I had been working in a couple of projects in Hyderabad and Karnataka also. So it was pretty difficult to understand those principles, you know, and actually implement them to make a house of today's context. Yeah.
So basically, Vastu was like the science of building houses and the like allocation of spaces.
Mhm.
So I think they like it was embedded in their tradition,
Yes.
and so from generations they continue to follow that only.
Right.
And like it is still somewhat embedded in them, and they would like to like continue with themselves staying in that kind of a tradition.
Right.
It's a
And
legacy
when-
that is being actually followed in the
It's
southern
not
states.
only it's not only
An
southern, like it's
architectural legacy.
yeah.
no, it's
Even
for
other
the
states
entire country actually. It's not just the southern part of the
Yeah,
country.
yeah.
It's for
Actually.
the entire country. Vastu
Yes.
had been this part of Southeast Asia itself had been compliant to Vastu, and even today when we are
I'm just
talking about how to make a design which is compliant to sustainability, to orientation, to Sanpath and all, we are still talking about Vastu in a different language. We still talk
Exactly.
about
Yes.
Vastu.
Like
What
it's
we
a modernized form of Vastu.
Right, what you study is also Vastu. Yeah, but we
Yeah.
talk it in a different language. I mean, the Vastu that they had been working on was, the principles were similar. A lot of stuff
Yes.
had become non-relevant as of today's context. It was probably relevant if you are making one single house in the midst of a huge paddy field. So then it becomes a different context altogether. And if you are referring it to a housing apartment of a 10, 15, 20 story building,
Yeah.
so it doesn't really
It's a
make
different
sense.
story.
And with today's urban environment that is there, right? So that's
Yeah.
the whole scenario, right?
But looking into the modern picture, it is kind of like in the commercial field itself, we'll see that there's a part of client who actually goes for the more aesthetics of the building rather than the functionality, and some people again go for the like this should abide by the vastu of this side.
Yes,
So
yes,
exactly.
we actually have but there's this kind of a major division in the types of client that actually approach these in the commercial firms. But
Yes.
out there, it's more like a religious pattern that is being still
Right.
followed, where people want to build their house and orient their spaces according to the Vastu Shastra.
And see, what happened is, the earlier people were more religious per se, and even now a lot of people are religious. But some of us
Yeah.
are probably, we have moved on from religion and we have moved on to maybe the religion of science per se. But
Somewhat.
when doing some housing projects, people, you are executing a housing project of like 5 lakh square feet area where there is a high density housing, and you are asking Vastu there, and you have a plot of 5 acres. I mean, how do you do that?
It is not possible in that sort of areas, and like the requirements do not
Yeah.
meet up like that.
Right. So that is really
They are
very
bent
challenging.
upon practicing the Vastu in the design.
Yeah, exactly.
In Hyderabad, in one case in Hyderabad, another one is Vizag. I mean, we actually had to forcefully implement those, and it was very painful experience. For that matter, you see, in the Vizag project, it was just at the slope of a hill which gradually goes towards the ocean. I mean, the housing complex was on top of the hill, and you have the ocean on the other side, where you have a beautiful view from there, right? So imagine you want to orient all your houses, all your windows and bedrooms in one direction, which is actually on the opposite direction of the ocean.
For the beautiful view.
What can you expect, right? So it's a very challenging moment for an architect to design something like that, where you want to do something and you are forced to do something else. So that is a very unique experience that had happened. Yeah, and it is also very not very cost efficient. Of course, it increases the cost in many ways, because the moment you are you are not able to align your toilets on either side of your duct, you need 2 ducts for independent each toilet.
The cost in
Exactly.
Yeah,
The costing
Yeah.
goes up.
That
You
augments.
can't
the
have one
cost.
shaft on 4 sides of which there are toilets, because as per Vastu you will not be able to do that, right? You will have to copy paste. You can't mirror your apartment model, right?
and lot of spaces also goes wasted.
Wasted.
Like,
Many
Maybe
a
like
time,
some
many a
But there's no
authority
need of
should,
it.
some kind of a balance which you strike in terms of the today's context and terms of how much of the Vastu compliance you need to take from.
take
Right.
into account.
The compliance level should remain balanced.
Yes,
basically.
yes. You need to identify those. There should be some cutoff level. You need to negotiate with the clients ki how much of those points the client is. See, some people are stuck to their feelings. They have some kind of a
Yeah.
religious feeling towards
Religious
Vastu,
belief.
of course. I mean, they should be scientifically explain why you are supposed to have your bedroom oriented in so and so direction, your toilets in so and so direction, and so on, and come to a judicious conclusion. I should say it will take time. It is very difficult and it is not easy. Today we really don't have time to argue with the clients and go into so much of a
Yeah.
detail in a project. Many times the turnaround terms of projects, you need to quickly generate new projects and so on. But I think it is best when we work towards the interest of the client in terms of how you need to give the best the alternative. There should be a balance between today's science and yesterday's
Yeah.
architecture. Yeah.
Yes.
Sure, sir.
Yes, sir. Compromise on both the
Sure.
parties.
Yeah.
Compromise should be there.
Yeah.
Correct.
To get the best solution.
I mean, it's not compromise to lose yourself. It's a win-win compromise.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a win-win situation.
True.
Yeah.
For both sides.
Right. All right. So who is next?
So me, Shomavo.
Hmm.
So continuing with the presentation, we will now talk about the Kodava houses, or known as the Animane. The Kodagu district in the Karnataka is the only region of the south known for its martial people. Every Kodava belongs to a clan or a Vokka, and there are more than 300 clans within the community itself. Every clan lived in an Ainmane ancestral house. The patriarch and the matriarch of the clan lived in the Ain house with their sons and their families. However, as the families grew up, there was a need to build more living space. Usually, the younger sons moved away and built families of their own and also houses. About 200 years ago, the grand homesteads bustled with activity. The granaries were filled with stocks of rice to last a year. Firewood was chopped and stocked to see them through the long monsoons. The iron house resonated with shouts of grandchildren, the clatter of horse carriages, bullocks, pigs, chickens, and also the barking of hunting dogs. The joint family system was the hallmark in the Ainman culture. Men and women cultivated paddy on their land under the leadership of the master of the family and shared the bounty after the harvest. The ancestral house is marked by a deeply cut passage known as the Oni, leading to the front. The Oni is paved with rough stones and has sloped walls on either side. An ideally built Ainmane resembles a fort. The Ainmane has always been a mirror reflecting the Kodava culture. The
Do you
ancestral
realize how
abode.
that do you realize how that word is so similar to a Bengali word, Ainmane?
Which one?
Ainmane is so similar to Bengali because in Kannada is very similar in many places with Bengali. Ainmane actually means the same, almost similar. It means a clan house or a house where people are obliged or obeying to a particular clan, and they stay in that particular house. So they obey a certain set of rules and stay there. Right.
Like that basically goes on in a joint family.
Joint family.
Like
The
there's a
people
head of
who
a
are
house.
obeying the rules of a joint family. Are Ainmane.
Ainmane.
Ainmane, right? So it's very similar. I mean, and these houses are there in Coorg, just very close to Bangalore.
Okay.
I was in Bangalore for long, for 5-6 years I was there. I almost drove around in my own car for like the half of the southern India I have drove through. And I have gone to so many places and so very unique architecture I've seen. These guys, they had their houses, and today they are of no use. They had their huge joint families. People have moved on to somewhere else, maybe abroad or maybe to the Gulf or somewhere, and they are only maybe the elderly people are.
People are only living there.
Yeah, so they rent out those houses for homestays. So you can book on over phone or over net and go there and stay with them. So pretty amazing feeling. I mean, you are just there's a huge hill where you have orange gardens, maybe a tea garden, coffee gardens, inside which there are elephants. You know, so you can stay there. Pretty amazing architecture to observe
So
there.
it would be a wildlife experience then.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah,
incorporating
yeah.
nature into architecture.
Really, I mean, go down to, I mean, see, we are having a 2-3 months of a lockdown here. I mean, imagine if we were not in a lockdown and you had holiday so long. So where all you could have gone?
So you wouldn't have found us right here
Where
now.
we get fresh air.
Yeah,
Like
right.
Like away from the city
Yes,
life.
like
Or
fresh
maybe like a
air.
lockdown in such kind of a settlement with orange gardens and elephants. I don't think that would be anymore a lockdown.
Yeah,
It will
Yeah.
That
be,
would be a vacation.
like a vacation.
that would be a vacation.
Yeah, and in the countryside or villages, there's no point in having a lockdown because the population density is so less. I mean, in any
Yeah.
case, you are having a lot of social distancing, and there is no problem being with the nature, which is fine. The problem is
Yeah,
only in the city.
Exactly.
Problem is with the
True,
city
right.
people, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, continue.
Yes, sir. So as I was mentioning earlier, that these ancestral abode are a remarkable structure, and they are also considered to be a place of unique bonding. The structure of this building is thought to be a symbol to the unity of the family. On festivals and even important occasions, the Vokka and the Vokka clan members gather at the Animane and partake in the ceremonies held there. Also called the Gurukarna Mani or the Guru Mani. The Animane gives Kodavas their family name. Several family units put together comprise of a Vokka, and each Vokka owns an Animane. The kings who ruled the Kodagu built their palaces following the architectural style of the Taravar houses of the Nayars of Kerala, proof of the cordial relations between Kodagu and Kerala. Typically, the Animane stands on a hillock surrounded by paddy fields, swaying areca nut trees, and coffee plantations. Now, coming inside the house of the Animane. The Animane, depending on the wealth of the clan, stands surrounded by the huts of the farm workers and animal sheds. A well provides fresh water, and it has long, sloped tiling roof to face the onslaught of the torrential monsoon. There is a central courtyard which is open to the sky. A narrow corridor runs all around the courtyard, connecting the rooms. Usually the kitchen is at the rear part of the house, or even a little away from the house, so that the smoke is kept away. The toilet and the bathing areas is always kept away from the main building. Two massive wooden poles adorn the entrance of the house. The central Nadubade would consist of 3 wooden poles, of which the first pole is called the Kanikamba. It supports the whole roof of the Animane. The Kanikamba is as significant as the Thuk Volcha, which is the hanging lamp, and it is lit every day at the Nelakki Vade, which is the prayer room. At the Animane, the prime position is given to Karona, the head of the particular family. During the ceremonies, the family members would seek the blessing by touching the base of the Kanikamba and then the feet of the elders. Images of sun, moon, flowers, etc. adorn the Kanikamba and also the main doors, which signify that the Kodavas were nature worshippers. An integral part of the Animane is the Kaimada, an important structure built in the memory of the founder of that family or Vokka. It is a prayer place which is used during happy or even sad ceremonies. Unique feature about the Kodava culture is that the men and the women share same kind of respect, status, and position. The 4 major parts of this type of household are Padsale, the rectangular hall around which the rooms are arranged, the Mundu, the inevitable open courtyard in the center, the Kanikombara prayer palace, which is where the deity is installed. Here, the Karona, symbolized by a lamp, is worshipped and offered food at festivals. The kitchen portion, which is sacred, and the mud stove or oven should face the east.
Okay, so coming to examples, the first example is the Chikmagalur house. Mr. K.A. Muhammad Ismail built this house in 1914. The house represents one part of the history of the Chikmagalur district in Karnataka, as well as the Muslim heritage of Karnataka. Mr. Muhammad's ancestor immigrated from West Asia, Turkey, to Bijapur several centuries ago, and later to Chikmagalur. His neighbors say he may have owned 5 acres of coffee, appropriate both for the area which is known for its excellent coffee as well as for the tale which attributes the introduction of coffee by an Arab trader into Chikmagalur in the late 1700s. Now, the second example is Ilkal Weaver's house. This cluster of weavers' houses from northern Karnataka represents an urban settlement pattern and is typical of weavers' houses in the larger northern region of Karnataka. The wooden elements have been taken from similar houses near Bagalkot from a village which has now been flooded by the new dam. However, as the Bagalkot houses had already been dismantled, the Ilkal cluster was taken as a model after research around the area and has been reconstructed accurately at Dakshina Chitra.
So with that, as he ends with the examples of the vernacular architecture of Karnataka and Andhra Pradesh, now we move on to the last state and the fourth state, basically the vernacular architecture of Tamil Nadu. So here in the state Tamil Nadu, the vernacular houses in this region had their origin from a humble single-space rural hut that were built by the locals with the materials that were locally available and with the techniques and the types of patterns that they already knew. But later on, due to the increasing needs and requirements of spaces of shelter, and also due to the exposure to a variety of materials that were being used worldwide, and also with the techniques and patterns that actually help us to build a structure in a more cost-effective way, in a more tech-savvy way, the dwellings have undergone various changes and transformations. And this transformation we can actually bring about in like different stages, particularly in 3 stages. So in the first stage, the most primitive form of rural dwelling, which forms the origin of the vernacular architecture of Tamil Nadu, is a single-space multifunctional unit constructed using mud, thatch and other temporary materials which are pertinent to this region. They were circular in plan initially with a domical roof, but later with the advent of new technology, so even rectangular plans became very common. They were generally circular before because of the materials that were used for building such structures. Now, these rudimentary forms of dwellings are highly sustainable in owing to the materials that they are actually used, which are very climate responsive to that region and locally available. And by the picture of this stage 1 architectural styles. Now we'll move on to the stage 2. So in the second stage of development, the dwelling has a tripartite division. So the structure, which actually previously had a single space, which was of a multi-purpose nature, now had 3 proper assorted spaces, and they are basically Thinnai, which is the front raised veranda, second space being in the middle living, and the rearmost part, the third space, being Samayal, which is a kitchen. And all of these spaces basically had a gender reference to it and also had a linkage to the privacy level, which will be explained further by Prashita.
This Tamil Nadu, this has got some exemplary architectural styles in terms of bioclimatic architecture, which is more sustainable to the nature. Because Tamil Nadu is one of the places which, the most ancient parts of India are there. Like it dates back to, even before Mohenjo-daro probably. Yeah, and so there is a huge history of a civilization is out there in Tamil Nadu, and just next to it, the part of Sri Lanka. Yeah, the kingdom of Ravana
Ceylon.
and stuff.
Yes,
Even they date back
Ceylon.
even Mahabharata's times. Right, so you'll see some amazing sort of architecture in the core of Tamil Nadu. If you move away from outskirts of Chennai or go further interiors, so they're pretty much amazing stuff.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. So, continuing with it, like as Shatrupa ended by saying the stage 2 had 3 divisions and it had gender link to it. So, coming to the gender link, the front part was basically the male zone, the middle part was a family zone, and the rear end of the house was the female zone, which was segregated into public, semi-private, and private activities in a dwelling. So, these structures were constructed using the locally available materials such as laterite stone, mortar, country wood, bamboo, tiles, like which are basically abundantly available anywhere in that area, around that area. The roof of this house was pitched with 2 sided slope, and it had and was covered with locally made country tiles. Now coming to the last stage, which was the stage 3, there were 3 divisions up to date. The stage 3 saw the inclusion of courtyard, which was in the middle part of the dwelling. And this was the most important part of development in the residential part in Tamil Nadu, because it facilitated not only additional activities, but it was also very climate responsive design element it added to this architecture in Tamil Nadu. And these structures were also again built with locally available materials like brick, stone, wood, tiles, mud, and the roof now had ridges and valleys for the first time in the whole tradition of vernacular architecture in South, to accommodate the internal open to sky space, which was basically the courtyard. And later on, this unit or this nucleus or this core, as we may say, to the courtyard, this became a major part of development in the residential or dwelling parts of Tamil Nadu. In these dwellings, we can see further future constructions that this courtyard played such an important role. And certain examples that where we can see this type of building in Tamil Nadu are the merchant house at Kandor village at Ramnad district, and the Brahmin house at Ambur village, and also the silk weaver's house in Kanchipuram. So these examples cites us about the different type of vernacular architecture in Tamil Nadu. So by this we come to an end and we conclude our assignment, which was vernacular architecture of South India. So thank you, sir, and thank you, fellow batchmates, for completing this assignment with me.
All right, thank you.
sir.
So in vernacular architecture of throughout India, in fact, basically the idea was to capture the local flavor that is there all around, and the idea is not really to mug up all those stuff, but to take something which you can implement in your design that you're doing right now. So one by one, I would ask what was your takeaway from this exercise that you have done, which you can implement in your design that you are doing right now. So Somavo can start.
Sir, my take from this would be to find a common ground between these kinds of traditional architectural styles and also the modern styles which we have used, and I would try to combine both of them while doing my design, and I would try to present that type of a design in my thesis. And as you know and heard,
tell us about that.
Sorry, sir.
You tell us about a bit of your thesis topic, and then how would you take it from there?
Sir, actually, my thesis topic from the first review, I have decided to go with the Music Research Center and it is situated in Bishnupur. I thought about researching music and also actually nurturing the knowledge of music regarding Bishnupur areas. And as we know that Bishnupur area consists of a rich culture. It has a different form of temple architecture, and also the normal houses there are also built following that type of traditional architecture itself. So it is sort of similar to what I have learned in this assignment, that in this assignment, as we have seen, that there are various types of traditional architectural forms and different parts of the states in which comprise of South India. It has 4 states, and the 4 states have different parts, different styles of architecture. So my Bishnupur area, the Bishnupur area itself has its own architectural style, and I would try to implement those architectural styles in my design while I'm designing this musical research center, so that it follows in the modern buildings also follow an essence of the architectural style, and it doesn't look just out of the box a modern structure. It embraces itself Bishnupur architecture.
Due to the context, you need to design for the context. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Good. Right. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Rashita.
Yes, sir. So my thesis topic is basically a wellness center for psychological illness. And right now we can even see that in our country, people are more concerned about the physical fitness rather than mental health. Like we can see all around social media right now, people are like putting up challenges and things like that. So mentally we can right now see how it is affecting us, the quarantine and everything around us. So we can see the 4 walls that we are enclosed in right now can affect so much the working productivity of ours. So basically when I design, the first thing which I learned from this vernacular architecture from the South is specifically like being more related, like being more not doing any high-rise building as such, like in my case will be more inclusion of the courtyard, which I learned, like so that people can feel more towards breathe fresh air, and when they come out of the room they can see and experience nature, rather than, because it is situated in an urban area which is in Newtown. So basically I don't want to like create a very like close back to back buildings side by side or go height wise. So it will be more close to nature. It will have some water features, it will be some flowers, some gardens for those patients that would be there. Inclusion of the courtyard will also have a dynamic thing, like it is like people can go there to have a walk, and even people because there are patients of different age group in my thesis. Their mental health is one of my most priorities. So the as we can see, being closed in 4 doors, like when we look outside the doors we can see a living room or anything of that sort. So when the patients are closed within the 4 walls, when they look out, I want them to see the corridor, the activities going on, so they don't feel alone, even being isolated from the other patients. So that would be something that I would include in my design.
Right, because the whole idea of having a kind of a sustainable, affordable or vernacular sort of feel into your architecture, it is all about minimizing the cost and the environmental impact. The whole the intent of having the vernacular architectural style was when people were designing, like long back in the olden times, in the ancient times, when they used to design, they had just 4 factors in mind. One was site, second was climate, third was material, fourth was skill. So the skill was their own, the material was locally, immediately available, whatever was there. The climate was the context of the climate that was there throughout the year, and the site, whether it is unlimiting site, whether there is a marshy land or a hard land or whatever it is. So as for the site,
it should be a climate responsive.
They designed with their hands-on skill. So they were the architect of their own, right? And they were the very first architect. And they even sometimes they say that they had consulted with people of the engineering group, that is the Vishwakarma group. Vishwakarma is not, listen, Vishwakarma was not really one person. It was the name of a company. Yes. It was the name of a group of people who were engineers at that point of a time. Maybe for that matter, the Larsen and Toubro of those times. Yeah. So it was something like that. So they had referred, they had asked their priests in the temples, they had asked their sages or the Muni Rishis or whoever there, who knew about the climate, how the sun path was there, how much of rain is going to come that year, the next year, and so on. in which direction the groundwater would be flowing, so that whether there will be a flow of water through their house in terms whenever there is a rain or not. So these things they usually analyze. So 4 factors have to be there. Even today when you design, if you are still continuing with those 4 factors, you can design. Even just taking those 4 factors and designing on your own will qualify as a approach to vernacular architecture. It's not just a copying those elements and pasting in your design. It is the intent of the design, whether you have taken it from there or not, right?
Yes.
Even it is modern, doesn't matter. It may be modern, it may be a Sangeet Kala Kendra like Somavos or whatever it is. It may be an ancient, connective to the ancient structure, or it may be a ultra modern structure, whatever it is. It can still have those sense of design. Right. So, who is now? Somdev.
Yeah, sir. My thesis topic was about bus terminus in Howrah.
Right.
So from this assignment, I would like to take the concept of the Chutilu and the Guthu houses. So in Chutilu, we have seen that these are from coastal Andhra Pradesh, and how they position their houses to cope up with the raging winds. So as it's in Howrah, it's near the bank of river Hooghly, that the crosswinds can be a factor of just playing with that wind factor, so that there is a comfort zone throughout the site. And if we talk about the Guthu house, I would like to take the concept of the square complex and the symmetrical facade, in which here in Guthu houses, as we know that it's a square complex with space in between. So in bus terminus, basically we need a space for those buses and create those bus areas and the pedestrian in this concept of a square way can be helpful for my project.
Right. See, even if you are designing for today, and if it is a public structure, and located some place like Howrah, where there is a lot of historical connect, you need to still incorporate a couple of factors, probably like 8 of them. Whether number one is the availability of resources, the skilled workforce if you are getting from the local place. You have to look at the climate and your location just next to the river per se. Then just because there is a historical building of the Howrah station itself, right? So whether the influence of that particular building will be on the design that you are making. So it's a very strong factor. You can't suddenly make something which is out of context. Neither can you directly copy.
Yes, sir.
So you'll have to strike a balance. And how would you connect or complement your design with the design that is existing? Right. So these things you need to balance.
Yes, sir.
And also you need to see what is the kind of local culture out there. Then the environment has, and environment doesn't mean only the climate. It has to be a microclimate. Right. The moment there is a densely populated area with densely population of not only people but also vehicle and stuff, a huge kind of a climate, microclimate condition happens there, which is completely different from the entire climate of that particular region. Howrah station itself will have a different kind of a climate because of the kind of density that is there. Right. So you need to look at those factors with available technology that is there and natural and local skilled labors and whatever that is there. So one of the most significant influences that vernacular architecture is that macroclimate of that particular area and the microclimate. So these things you need to figure out and implement in your design, however you do doing it. Right. Okay. Good. So who is left? Shatarupa.
Yes, so my thesis program is on Rar Bangla folk art and handicraft. So basically it's a center where the different types of handicrafts and art forms like that of Chou and terracotta figurines and Dokra, which are very prevalent in the Bankura, Birbhum and Purulia districts of West Bengal. So that will be practiced, educated, and the people will be trained out there. So talking about this very subject, vernacular architecture, and my thesis program, I'd like to take back the two very broad concepts. That is, one is the interrelationship of the architecture with the climate, and the second one being the interrelationship between the architecture agriculture, and the social work. So keeping those, as we know, rural settlements are quite different from that of those urban settlements. And like in the urban sector, we have designated architects and engineers who actually build up these structures. But out there in the rural areas, the people are their own architects. They build their own houses. They do not assign a different set of architects to build their houses. So out there in my complex, I have to build structures because the local people are going to come visit there and practice their art form out there. So my structures need to be somewhere linkage between the traditional residential spaces and the commercial spaces that they are habituated with. And also because I'll be having tourists who are visiting the Ajodha range and the Ajodha Pahad, even they will be visiting. So this entire village, this entire center also should have a modern outlook. So that we need to draw a line, separating line, yet like a kind of a bridging. We need to do a bridging between them, and also pertaining to the climate. So the interrelationship that, as we studied in vernacular architecture itself, that the climate has with architecture. So as we know, Purulia is a very hot and dry climate. It actually suffers from drought for a lot. It has actually suffered from droughts in the past years. So I have to see like how I can conserve this water, how can I use water, and how can I use open spaces with shaded devices, which are like semi-permanent, not permanent constructions, but semi-permanent constructions, because they are more used to open spaces, open to sky spaces. But for the comfort level that I need to bring in my design, there needs to be spaces which serves both as open to sky, and also like there's this comfort level that is maintained out in my village or in my complex, designed complex, because with aesthetics also comes comfort, and with comfort comes the practicality and the success of any project. So to make it successful, it needs to look good, it needs to properly function, and it also needs to provide the comfort, because as we know, I'll just cite a very small example. So one of the major art forms that is going to be practiced and trained out there is of Cho. So for Cho, these artists actually, they like to exhibit or prefer to exhibit this art form in major amphitheaters and open air theaters. But just providing an example, like for a visitor who is visiting this site in a peak summer day, like sometime in the month of May, and I'm in the afternoon, and I'm asking him or her to maybe see a performance on the Cho sitting in the amphitheater with a 42 degrees Celsius outside. So I don't think that person will be preferring to see such a performance. He'll be like, no, I think I'm fine back in my car. So yeah, but then again, but then I can't actually kind of restrict myself from providing these artisans the spaces that they would like to perform in. So yes, we have to see in both the comfort level, which again comes from the climate that is actually present. And as you were mentioning about the macroclimate and the microclimate, even that needs to be looked after. So I think this is what I take from this subject and try to link with my thesis program.
Yeah, and the moment you do it, you need to identify what are the materials that are available there locally, because vernacular architecture is all about using locally available materials in construction. The materials used in that particular architecture, it can vary from place to place, definitely. Your place to Prashita's place to Shoma's place to all these will vary. But the construction elements should include the adobe wall, the rammed out, the mud bricks, the thatch, maybe the cop, the bamboo, the stone blocks or wood blocks or clay, fly ash, burnt bricks, whatever is there locally available. So those so on. And also you need to, again, like those four aspects: the site, climate, material, and the skill of those people. You are dealing with the skill directly, the people that are there. So these things you need to take care of. Because in vernacular architecture, the users design and build at the same place. So the design as well as the building happens at the on spot. It's in situ design and in situ building. It's not like today's architecture, right? Because they are the architect of their own designs, right? There's a very interesting definition of vernacular architecture which Frank Lloyd Wright has given us, and I quote: folk building growing in response to actual needs, fitted into an environment by the people who knew no better than to fit them with native feeling. So he says that it is something which they knew nothing better than that. I mean, that's the best they knew, and that's the best they did. So that is all about vernacular architecture is. I mean, great. So I
So in
think we're running
such a
out of time here.
context,
Yes.
so in such a context, like you mentioned about the definition that Frank Lloyd Wright has
Yes.
provided for the vernacular architecture, we can actually draw a very similar analogy to the very basic definition of democracy, where we say that it is for the people, of the people, and by
Yes.
the people.
Right.
So I think
Yes.
the
Yeah.
architecture that is going to practice in my complex, or maybe in the complex of each and everybody right now present out here in this session, is an architecture for the people, by the people, and of the people.
Yes.
That have a close
Definitely.
context to it.
That's the trick. Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So I think we are running out of time here, and
Yes.
that's a very great session we had together here. So shortly I'll be uploading
Thank you,
this.
sir.
Check that out. Yeah. And inform your
Sure,
other
sir.
friends as well.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for
Sure,
supporting.
sir.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Somdev also. Thanks. Tata. Bye.
Bye,
Bye,
sir.
sir.
Okay. Stay home. Stay safe.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you.